Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, the 18th Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you. You know, when I see and get a reception like this, you know, one thought crosses my mind. Do you think it's too late for a comeback? I mean, when I was there at the time, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who was older than me, was Mahathir Mohamad, and he was Prime Minister for a long time. Last June, he made a comeback, and he's now the Prime Minister of Malaysia again, and he's 92. I figure that I just turned 80. So I could run on the slogan, give youth a chance. In fact, I have to tell you that one day, many years ago, Emile and I were watching the news in Montreal, in Westmount, and the Prime Minister of Canada was on a tour to the Middle East, and he was being interviewed. And they said, Prime Minister, what is the Canadian position on, or recommendations, to deal with the Arab-Israeli dispute? And the Prime Minister said, don't ask me. I don't even know if I'm in North, South, East, or West Jerusalem. So I said to Mila, this guy's so bloody bad, I'm going to get myself elected as Conservative leader again, and I'm going to become Prime Minister. There was total silence. So I turned to Mila and I said, you hear what I said, dear? And she said, oh yes, I heard. Well, I said, what do you think? She said, I think it's a wonderful idea. And I know your new wife is really going to love the experience. Well, I see a lot of my former classmates here. Reminds me of my years here where there was a lot of politics, there was a lot of athletics, and there was a lot of work in debating and things like that, extracurricular activities. I'm probably the only one of that class who spent a lot of time in the library. In fact, that was one of the criticisms of our class. But you know, I graduated in '59, so we spent a lot of time on politics, the truth is. And so in 1959, we graduated, and about 15 years later, I had done a few things for the university, and I was invited to accept an honorary doctorate, an honorary degree here at the university, which I did. And as I was walking across the stage to receive the degree, one of my professors was overheard saying to another, you know, I think this is the second honorary degree Mulroney has gotten from this place. And I want to thank Premier McNeil for his very eloquent and thoughtful. You know, I would think I could say on behalf of everybody here that this guy could have quite a career in politics if he were just a little taller. And Frank, I'm going to talk about him in a moment, of course, about his role at St. FX, not only in this, but since he retired from the university and myself, his role has been sensational. And I think, Frank, any member of the Zavarian family thanks you very much personally, you and Julie, for the sacrifices you made on behalf of St. FX. When Canada was born, St. FX was 14 years old, having been founded by poor farmers and fishermen and clergy in 1853. It is therefore a special moment in my life today to participate in a ceremony marking the opening not only of splendid new buildings at St. FX, a place I love, but more importantly, the beginning of grand and brand new opportunities for young Canadians and others from around the globe to learn, lead, and help build a better world for us all. A highly impressive and generous new scholarship and bursary program will help many young students acquire the education that our founders just dreamt of. I must, at the outset, express profound gratitude to our donors, and in many instances, for their kindness in making the long trip to be with us here today. There is no way that I can adequately thank you who have made this event possible. But perhaps one day, as the graduates of this new institute make a beneficial mark on our national and international institutions, you will look back with satisfaction and whisper to yourself, I was there to make it happen. And so my sincere thanks to you all. You are wonderful, generous, kind people, and St. FX is eternally grateful for you. When I was young in Baie-Comeau, I had a conversation with my father late on a Sunday night when he returned from the paper mill where he worked as an electrician. He also held down a second job on his days and evenings off, wiring homes and repairing oil burners. While he did that, my mother, apart from raising 6 young kids, 3 of whom are here today, in a tiny mill house, my mother also took in boarders to try and make ends meet. Times were not easy, and I told my father that night of the new apprenticeship program being launched at the mill, where children of employees could train as tradesmen, plumbers, mechanics, welders, and the like, while being paid a good wage and have a guaranteed future employment with the company. My father's reply is engraved in my memory. He said, I know, Brian, that times are tough. And we could sure use the extra money you would bring in. But I've learned one thing. The only way out of a paper mill town is through a university door, and you are going to university. And that's how I wound up at St. FX. when I graduated here, our convocation speaker that day, the great editor Grattan O'Leary, reminded us that a good education is not principally to provide us with a standard of living, but it's principally to provide us with a standard of life. When I left this campus with my classmates, as I say, some of whom are here today, when I left to head to the big city with the bright lights to conquer the world, or so we all hoped, I had no money, no connections, and no influence. But I had two things of far greater value: a degree from St. FX and the values that had been inculcated into us by a superb faculty and university leaders here in Antigonish. In the Old Testament, the prophet says that young men have visions and old men dream dreams. I can remember those days of my youth, and I can remember feeling as happy and excited and ambitious as anyone could possibly be. And now, today, as I look back through the vista of the years, I can remember the accomplishments and the setbacks. I can recall the splendor of the view from the highest mountaintop and the sorrow one feels in the valley of defeat. Life is an unending sequence of challenges from which no one, absolutely no one, emerges unscathed. Defeat is not something to fear, but surrender is something to reject. Throughout an active and sometimes tumultuous life, never once did it ever occur to me, not for a second, to quit. I learned on this campus that failure was not an option. I learned here as well the true meaning of the words of President Truman when he said, "There are no great men. There are only ordinary men who rise to meet great challenges." And so each time I return to St. FX and meet our students, as I do today, I see hope for our future in this explosive and highly dangerous world. And I see inspiration for our citizens because of the firm and able leadership emerging slowly in this country and elsewhere around the globe, where we need collectively so much leadership, understanding, and skill in leading our countries. For me, arriving at St. FX in the fall of 1955, 64 years ago this month, when I did the calculation, it scared the hell out of me. Because Mila finally found out how old I really am. But I knew when I arrived that it opened the door to a wider world. I was quite literally a boy from Baie-Comeau, carrying a cardboard suitcase and wearing the only blazer I owned. And who did I meet? Well, the friends of a lifetime, mostly from small towns and villages in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, and the New England states, and a smattering of others from around the world. They were friends from all sides of the political aisle, and I learned then that politics ends at the water's edge, where friendships begin and endure. At St. FX, from outstanding professors in philosophy, history, and political science, I learned about the power of ideas to transform our country from one century to the next. And at the end of the day, I also learned that big ideas are about leadership. Leadership. The courage to take big, if unpopular, decisions. And it's about fundamental change. This small university in Nova Scotia has long played a disproportionate role in Canadian politics and public policy. As you know, the main players in Parliament are the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of the Government in the Senate, and the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate. During an extended period in the 1980s and 1990s, 3 of the four of these players were St. FX graduates. Lowell Murray, I think Lowell is here today. Lowell Murray, who was the leader of the government in the Senate. Alan McCacken, leader of the opposition in the Senate. And me as Prime Minister of Canada. How good is that for a small place in Nova Scotia? Not to mention, from St. FX, great premiers like Angus L. MacDonald and Frank McKenna. And I can tell you, I'm a student of history too, and I played a little role in some of it. I can tell you that I wasn't around to see Angus L. MacDonald, but I was around. Although some people suspect that I was, but I was there to watch Frank McKenna work. Undefeated, government after government. The Conservatives were just bewildered by the whole thing. I used to tell them, don't worry, he's from St. FX. And he was, and I think that history will record that Frank McKenna will rank always, I don't care who does the study and I don't care when it's done, always at the very top of provincial premiers in the entire 152-year history of Canada. Well, see, Frank was born in the Miramichi in New Brunswick, and I went to St. Thomas High School in New Brunswick, in Chatham, in the same place. Now they moved St. Thomas to UNB, the campus, and Frank and I work on a campaign there. And Frank said to me when we were working on this campaign, we had lunch at the Toronto Club, the two of us, and we're walking down Bay Street. And Frank said to me, you know, Brian, I think it's about time that you stop this campaign. I said, what are you talking about? He said, look, I don't know if you've noticed, we're walking along Bay Street, and all of our friends, when they see us, they cross to the other side. But he was with Caroline. Yeah. Well, we did it. So it's no accident that St. FX was named the best primarily undergraduate university in Canada for 5 years in a row in the annual Maclean Survey of Canadian Universities. Dr. Sean Riley, our distinguished former president, and Dr. Kent MacDonald, his highly impressive successor, have provided brilliant, absolutely brilliant leadership in bringing St. FX to such a significant position among Canadian institutions of higher learning. And now Dr. Kevin Walmsley follows strongly in that remarkable tradition. And I salute all of them here today and thank them for their service. And what was it about St. FX then and now that attracted many of the, as Paul Teddy, who's here, used to say, the best and the brightest of successive generations who decided to do their university studies at a residential college in a small town in central Nova Scotia, far from Montreal or Toronto or New York City. For me and thousands like me, that's just what St. FX represented. Not a big city, but a big opportunity. And today is all about how the Brian Mulroney Institute of Government can help St. FX enhance its role in this vital area of opportunity and leadership so as to better serve the citizens of our beloved nation and the wider world. In March 2012, Dr. Sean Riley, who's sitting right over there, and Tim Lang, his VP for advancement, visited Mila and me at our residence in Palm Beach and asked me to lead a campaign that would raise $25 million for St. FX. We began the campaign, Frank was involved as well, with some success, modest success, but we were getting going. And then, tremendously unfortunately, Sean suffered a serious illness, and Tim had an opportunity to move to Toronto in a challenging new job. So there we were with a campaign, but no leader, except if you consider McKenna and me leaders. Kent MacDonald soon stepped in as president, and Murray Kite as advancement vice president, and the successful work that we were able to do, assisted strongly by MacDonald and Kite, continued to the very end. And so for 6 years, I knocked on doors around the world for St. FX, and we ultimately raised $100 million. I was often in these meetings and my travels around the world. I was often deeply moved by the remarkable kindness of my interlocutors, including the late, great Ron Joyce, and many others who are here today. I see them sitting right here. I shall never forget the magnificent assistance they gave me and this wonderful university. Your names will be inscribed on our donors' wall with gratitude and respect, there to stay for eternity. Je veux également remercier très sincèrement mes amis du Québec et les sociétés québécoises qui m'ont épaulé avec force et d'une générosité remarquable dans cette campagne de financement tellement importante pour cette grande université. I want to thank my incomparable and extraordinary wife, Mila, for her unfailing love, devotion, and constant support of all my dreams, including this major one, on behalf of the university. Mila has always made everything seem easy. Mila has always made everything seem easy, even when it was not. For 46 years, she has effortlessly brushed away the clouds and always found a way for us and all the children to walk in the sunshine of life. The assistance and wise counsel of Frank McKenna was indispensable to the success of this initiative. And my daughter Caroline and son Mark, and old friends like Sam Wakeham and Steve Hudson, also helped greatly by securing major contributions at crucial moments that re-energized the campaign. In a special way, I want to thank as well Premier Stephen McNeill of Nova Scotia, whom I met, as he described, on that long flight to South Africa for Nelson Mandela's funeral. Well, you know, I think it was 16 hours to get there and at least as much to get home. And we sat there together, solved most of the problems of the world, you know. And we had long, important, or not important, but interesting conversations about Nova Scotia and its development and the economic evolution of the province over the last 50 years. And when we discussed the Mulroney Institute, because I took out my tin cup, after a respectable time, he immediately understood its importance for Nova Scotia and indicated that he and his government would actively support our efforts. We are most grateful to the Premier, and I express it today on behalf of the university. We are most grateful for your significant assistance. Obviously, the financial support of the Government of Canada was vital to our success, and I thank Prime Minister Trudeau for his genuine interest in and unflagging support of our efforts. His then Principal Secretary, Mr. Gerald Butts, whose late aunt Sister Peggy Butts was a most distinguished graduate of this university, and he was also an important supporter of this initiative, and they have our deep gratitude. This institute is open to all and to all ideas. Liberals, progressive conservatives, Greens, NDP, and others will find a home here marked by fairness, objectivity, and scholarship of the highest order. It was a high honor for me to be of some service to this special place. The words of an Irish poet seem appropriate today. The past is consumed in the present, and the present is alive only because it gives birth to the future. May the future of St. FX, its gifted professors, promising students, devoted staff, and immutable values, may the future of St. FX continue to benefit the soul of Canada and contribute to a more peaceful and prosperous world. Thank you all. Thank you all very, very much.